Power panel now. TW Shannon, former Republican Speaker of the Oklahoma House of Representatives, is here in town in person. David Carlucci, former Democratic New York State Senator, is here as well. TW, your top line thoughts about what's playing out?
Well, it seems to me that our president is playing politics with a very important issue. We all know that his heart is not in support of Israel. He is much like his predecessor, Barack Obama, and frankly, I think they could be almost considered enemies of Israel at this point. The truth is they've abandoned our longstanding support and friendship that we've had with Israel. Yes, he's the most duplicitous president maybe in American history because he's saying one thing, but during politics, he's definitely playing politics during the presidential year, trying to pretend like there's support for Israel. But ultimately, the reason Netanyahu canceled the original meeting is because he knows that the support among Democrats for Israel is waning in a big way. They've abandoned them, and I think it's a mistake long term, not just for Israel, but for the American people.
All right, this is a debate, so your rebuttal?
Well, I would disagree. I think, of course, anyone would be outraged about what happened to those humanitarian workers that are trying to deliver aid. But what we see is Biden trying to have peace, trying to move towards a resolution. There's no easy answers here. There's no, silver bullet that's going to solve this. Then you juxtapose it to the GOP nominee, Donald Trump, and what is he saying? He's saying, just end the war. End it soon. No talk about hostages, no talk about how you get there. It looks like Donald Trump is more of a publicity stunt than a foreign policy. Well, if you question and try to get what he actually is going to do, no one can tell you.
Well, I think we can do what we'd like to do is do what he did when he was in the White House as president of the United States, where we didn't have this issue. We didn't have an issue of Hamas raining terror on Israel like we have right now under Joe Biden. The reason we have that is because the world is a safer place when Israel's strong. Listen, there should be outrage, but the outrage should be because a terrorist group attacked Israeli citizens on a specific day in October, and that needs to be addressed, and we need to bring the American citizens home. That's where the outrage should be. The fact that we have Americans still being held hostage by Hamas, it's an outrage. That's where the hearts of the American people should be.
On this very program, we had the parents of one of those Americans being held. He grew up in Long Island, New York, was getting ready to go to Binghamton College and went to take his part in the IDF and got pulled out of a tank by Hamas and has been held ever since. I will say this with regard to the hostages, though. Why didn't the United States vote no on that UN resolution against that resolution? Why didn't they say no rather than abstain? Because it didn't mention the hostages either. It only called for a ceasefire. Why not? That makes us look, we're not allowed to be neutral. So in TW's words, maybe we're an enemy in that point.
Absolutely not. Look, the United States is a strong ally of Israel. There's no question about that. And Joe Biden is trying to move forward with actually walking the walk, not just talking, and sending aid, sending supplies and missiles to Israel to defend itself. That's crystal clear. Then you see just the nitpicking and, lobbing, stones over from Donald Trump with no clear policy.
You keep bringing him up. By the way, he has said, maybe you and I heard it differently. What he has said is, yes, he wants the war not to go on in perpetuity, but he also wants them to be able to do what they need to do with Hamas, because remember who he took out.
Harris, you're
Soleimani.
Right.
Remember who Obama took out. Osama bin Laden. I mean, he gets what you need to do against the enemy. That's what he's talking about.
Donald Trump gets it. It's peace through strength. That's what we need from the American leadership.
Even the Democrats are saying Biden looks weak. First Lady Jill Biden defending the president after more troubling polling. And it shows former President Trump leading in 6 of 7 key battleground states. Biden and Trump are tied in the 7th state of Wisconsin. Here's the First Lady's take.
He's not losing in all the battleground states. He's coming up, and he's even or doing better. So, you know what? Once people start to focus in and they see their two choices, it's obvious that Joe will win this election.
It's not a part of you that's a little worried? Because you seem to be off kilter a little bit.
No, I feel that Joe will be reelected.
Even Gayle King was trying to throw her like a lifeline there. Come on. How are you missing all these numbers? A new opinion piece with the headline, Joe Biden can't get out of the hole he's already dug for himself. David, I'll start with you.
Yeah, look, we've seen poll after poll that shows this is a razor-thin race. We saw a poll in Pennsylvania showing Biden actually winning by double digits that just came out the other day. So the bottom line here is we can't read too much into the polls. Should we be concerned? Absolutely. Is it Jill Biden's job to be concerned and worried? No. It's strategists and the political team. But with that said, this is a snapshot. The biggest takeaway for me from all this polling is how engaged people are. It shows about 40% of the electorate right now is still not engaged.
That's
and
fair.
I think that's why we see a lot of people not excited.
Sure.
And as we see the difference between Donald Trump and Joe Biden, as Trump continues to make these gaffes and talk about nonsense, we're going to see people coming over to Joe Biden.
Listen, if you're going to defend Joe Biden, you can't talk about gaffes because nobody's made more gaffes than Joe Biden has. The truth is, what the First Lady is doing, she's telling a bald-faced lie. In the latest polling, Joe Biden is behind in every single key state, except for one where they're tied. And in many of these, Donald Trump is ahead outside of the margin of error. The reason is this election is about security. It's about personal security. It's about financial security. It's about national security. And most of all, it's about border security, none of which Joe Biden is in a position to speak on. It's unfortunate that the First Lady is telling around the President of the United States, holding him by hand, shuffling him around from event to event. It's a sad state of affairs where we are. The American people know it. Over 70% of Americans say that Joe Biden is not mentally capable of leading this country. That's a fact you can't deny it, and it puts every American at risk, not just Republicans. Every American is at risk with Joe Biden in the White House.
The other point that we're not talking about here is that the issue with Florida, right? We just saw that there's going to be a referendum on the ballot.
To Florida and don't take up any of what he just said about your candidate.
Oh, there's plenty I could talk about there.
I think you're going to get a call from the Biden campaign soon saying, oh, no, throw him a lifeline. David, it is always good to see you. TW, you as well.
Good to see you, David.
Right, yes, you too.
And a handshake at the end. That's how Americans do it.
Right.
Absolutely.
Yes, we debate, and then we break bread together.
Hey everyone, I'm Emily Campagno. Catch me and my co-hosts Harris Faulkner and Kaylee McEnany on Outnumbered every weekday at 12 p.m. Eastern, or set your DVR. Also, don't forget to subscribe to the Fox News YouTube page for daily highlights.